Hey guys, so today I'm going to be doing my January wrap up. I apologise if you can hear some music in the background. It's summer in New Zealand, and in summer apparently we really like reggae, so sorry about the reggae if you can hear it. As usual, I'm going to be starting with my lowest star ratings and working up to my highest star ratings. The first book that I'm going to talk about was a 2-star read for me, and that was O Cruel Alexis by Virgil. I tend not to like ancient Greek and Roman classical literature, and I also tend not to like poetry, and unfortunately for me this one was both. This is just a little black classic that I've had on my shelf for a long time, so I thought I should get around to reading it. What I didn't think about was the fact that this is pastoral poetry, and I didn't really think about what the word pastoral means, and basically it's poetry about farming, which is even worse. So all in all, this book was really not for me. I did enjoy the second half of this ever so slightly more. There were some really dramatic analogies about bees, which I just found kind of funny, which probably wasn't the point, but I found them entertaining. Moving on to my 3-star reads, the first one is Runaways. This is the 4th issue by Rambo Rowell. This one has definitely not been my favorite out of the Runaways so far. The first 3 I gave 4-star ratings each, and this one was a 3-star for me. I just found that this one didn't really have any of the humor that I liked in the previous issues, and it also there wasn't really anything unexpected that happened. I kind of just feel like not much happened in this one. I feel like there is some tension building because I feel like there's something like creepy going on. My next 3-star read is Speaking of Siva, which is another little poetry kind of collection by 4 medieval Hindu saints. This one I quite enjoyed. There were some little poems in here that I enjoyed more than others. They're all like very short, and they're written in a free verse kind of style. I particularly enjoyed the ones by Basanava, so he's the first one of the saints who is in the beginning of this collection. One thing that really surprised me about this is that there's some really interesting views on gender. It sounds like the saints kind of question like the relevance of gender, and like why is it just a thing that we call different like parts of an anatomy, you know, like does it really matter? So there's some really interesting poems on that in here. There's actually a lot of them. My next 3-star read for the month was This Monstrous Thing by Mackenzie Lee. This is a historical fiction Frankenstein retelling. It's basically about a young man. He and his family are shadow boys, which means that they fix people with clockwork parts. So that part of it kind of reminded me a little bit of Cinder, because in Cinder the main character is like a cyborg, so she has some mechanical parts to her, and other people discriminate against her based on that, and it's kind of the same thing in this. There are certain people with clockwork parts because maybe they lost like a limb or something, so they might have like a clockwork leg, and people really discriminate against them for that, and they start to see them as not human just because they've got some mechanical parts. If you know the story of Frankenstein, you can kind of guess like the plot of this book. I don't really want to go into it too much because I don't want to spoil it, because the fact that it's a retelling kind of makes it a little bit predictable anyway. But overall the story was really dark. It was a really creative retelling, and I liked how Mackenzie Lee interwove some historical elements into it as well. Again, I don't want to go into it too much because I don't want to give away spoilers, but as much as it is based on Frankenstein, there are parts of this book that are based on real people as well, which I found really cool. However, I didn't really like any of the characters. I didn't like any of them as people, and I didn't find any of them particularly interesting, and I found the story like a bit predictable, which sometimes can be the case with retellings, but this one doesn't follow the original story that closely, but I still found it quite predictable. The next 3-star read was When I Am King by Matthias L. Magnusson. I have a full review of this book up on my channel, which I will link down below in case you want to check that out. But this one is basically about a young man who joins a cult. He goes to live at like the headquarters of a religion that he follows, and it's not quite what he expected. So if you like culty stories, would recommend this one. Now moving on to my 4-star reads for the month. My first 4-star read was The Invention of Hugo Cabret by Brian Selznick. This is a really interesting middle grade novel. A lot of it is made up of pictures, which is really cool. There's just one of them, but there's a ton of them in there, which really adds to the story. This is about a young boy who lives in a train station. He's an orphan, and there's something kind of mysterious. There's a bit of a mystery that he's trying to solve, and he gets involved with a toy maker who works in the train station as well. It's a really good historical fiction. It's set in France, and kind of similar to this monstrous thing, there are references made to a real person, like a historical figure, which I wasn't expecting either, and I don't want to say like who it is because it really surprised me when we got to that point in the story, but I thought it was so cool, and I love when authors take real people and kind of like write a story around them. I think it's so fun. There's also some photographs in here, so the pictures were amazing, the sketches are like fantastic, but there are some photographs used as well, which I thought was really fun and used really effectively. It really added to the story, and I almost wish there were more of them and like more pictures. I think some more of the story could have been told with pictures. The only downside of it for me was I didn't feel connected to the characters. I don't know why, but I just wasn't emotionally invested in the story. I thought it was really good, but I just wasn't like super connected to it. But overall, really awesome, and I would highly recommend this book. My next 4-star read was The Hair by Kara Cass, and this is the 4th book in the selection series. So the first 3 books in the selection series are kind of their own thing, and then this is basically a new storyline. So we follow a new character called Adolin. I don't know how you'd pronounce her name, but that's how I pronounce it, and she is having her own selection. So the original 3 selection books follow a prince having a selection, and so a bunch of women get brought to the castle and he has to pick one of them to be his wife. So it's basically like The Bachelor, but in a royal kind of way with some dystopian elements as well. And this book is basically the bachelorette version of that. So she has a bunch of eligible bachelors come to the palace, and she is having to try and weed through them and potentially pick one to be her husband. This book I thoroughly enjoyed so much. I enjoyed it actually a lot more than the original selection series, so I think this part of the series is going to be my favorite. I just loved it. The book had me like giddy the whole time. I was like laughing my way through it and like giggling at everything, and I loved so many of the characters that were introduced. Henry was one of my favorites. Kyle as well was one of my favorites. I just adore this book so much. There was some really intensely like stupid funny moments, and there was one in particular that took place when they were in the kitchen, and I won't say what it is because I don't want to spoil anything, but that moment that I found so funny, it was so stupid but it was like hilarious, and then it got brought up again later, which I just like, it made my day. The main character Adolin, she can be a little bit of a brat, but that's kind of the point. I'm expecting there'll be a great deal of character like development. I think she's going to grow a lot as a person, so I kind of don't mind that she's a bit bratty. That might drive some people crazy, I'm sure it has, but I really liked the story anyway, and the ending really shocked me, and I have to pick up the next book ASAP because it was crazy. Finally, moving on to my 5-star reads for the month. Firstly, a reread. I reread Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which I always love doing. It's guaranteed a 5-star reread. This is the longest book in the Harry Potter series, and it always takes me quite a while to get through. So I was reading this at the same time as I was reading other books, and there were moments in this month where I was reading 3 books at once, like switching between them, which I never do. I am totally a 1 book at a time kind of person, so I don't know what's gotten into me this month, but I really enjoyed reading Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix like throughout the entire month. Along the same Harry Potter lines, I also read The Art of Harry Potter this month, which mostly is not really reading, it was just looking through all of the pictures because there's so much beautiful art in this book. Stunning. 5 stars, totally enjoyed it and would recommend. Someone pointed out that it does have a different cover on Book Depository. I don't know why that is. It might be that this is like the British cover and that's the American one. Sometimes that happens. In New Zealand we tend to get British covers because we're more like associated with Britain because we were colonized by them, but I think the American one has this picture on the cover, which is on the back of this one. So yeah, I'll link it below on Book Depository if you want to get your hands on it. My next 5-star read was actually the first book that I read this year. I read this at midnight on New Year's Day, so like as soon as New Year's Eve was over and I was getting into bed, I picked up Almost Midnight by Rainbow Rowell. This is a beautiful little book. It's glittery, you probably can't tell on the camera, but it's stunning, and it has 2 short stories in it. The first one is called Midnights and the second one is Kindred Spirits, and there's a bunch of illustrations throughout the pages as well, which I thought was a really nice addition. I think that's really cool. I'd read Kindred Spirits before and that one had been a 4-star read for me, but this one I have rated 5 stars because I loved Midnights so much. Kindred Spirits is about a girl who's waiting in line for like a couple of days to go see the new Star Wars movie, and it's just about like the people she meets and conversations she has and that kind of thing. It's a short story, so there's not much to it, but it's really great. And then Midnights follows a character who goes to the same place for a party every New Year's Eve, and it's kind of switching between different years, like from her high school days up until her first year of college, and like how her life is changing and things like that. And it's the sweetest. It's basically a romance short story, and it's the cutest thing on the planet. I thoroughly enjoyed it and thought it was absolutely adorable, so I totally recommend this little collection as well. My final 5-star read for the month is one that you guys have already seen in my review of it, but I will link that down below in case you haven't watched it yet, because I love this book. It's amazing. I said in that review, and it still stands, that this is probably the best book that I've read of all time. Not just the best book I read this month, but the best book I've read ever. It's The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is about a guy who goes to college, and he wants to get in with this really exclusive group of students who are doing classical studies, so ancient Greek and Roman history, and he really wants to get in their group because they're very mysterious and very beautiful. There's some stuff going on. We know at the beginning of the book that a character called Bunny is dead, and we trace through figuring out how Bunny died and why all this stuff is going on and what happened afterwards, and it's just incredible. The characters are amazing, but I'm going to stop myself before I like rant on about it for too long, because you can go watch my review, which I'll link down below in case you haven't seen that already. This book is incredible though, and I would totally recommend it. So those are all of the books that I read throughout the month of January. If you've read any of them, let me know your thoughts on them in the comments down below, or if you want to read any of them, let me know that as well. And you can friend me on Goodreads if you want to keep up with what I'm reading throughout the next month, and follow me on Instagram and Twitter as well. I'll link both of those down below, and subscribe if you haven't already. I upload 3 days a week, and I'll see you guys with another video again soon. Bye.